All right, welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into it. Normally, when two ships collide at sea, international law dictates that only one country gets to investigate. But what happens when a ship doesn't actually belong to any country at all? Well, today we're diving deep into the intricate legal detective work of international maritime law as it currently stands right now in August 2026. This is a completely live, fast-moving, and honestly fascinating crisis. To untangle this massive geopolitical knot, we're going to quickly break it down into 5 parts. First, the flag state rule. Then, defining the dark fleet. Next, we'll look at Article 110, followed by a patchwork of legal workarounds, and finally, the uninsured hollow victory. So let's start with Section 1, the flag state rule. To grasp why we're dealing with such a massive crisis right now, we really have to look at how the system was originally built to function. Think about it. Imagine two massive cargo ships colliding in the middle of the ocean. Who actually handles the fallout? It creates a massive jurisdictional paradox if one of those ships technically belongs to literally no one. But to really understand this paradox, we've got to understand the rule that it's breaking. Back in 1927, during this famous incident called the Lotus Case, international courts basically ruled that any nation with a plausible connection could prosecute a high seas collision. And as you might guess, total chaos ensued. States found it completely unworkable. So over the next few decades, culminating in Article 97 of UNCLOS, they deliberately narrowed the rules. Today, collision jurisdiction is strictly limited to either the vessel's flag state or the accuser's home nation. It was designed to be this incredibly tight, exclusive system. Which brings us to Section 2, defining the dark fleet. Here's the crucial point. That rigid flag state rule we just talked about, it completely collapses the second we encounter the dark fleet. But we can't just treat this fleet as one big ambiguous blur, right? They actually fall into 3 very specific legal categories. First, you have genuinely stateless vessels, meaning they have no valid registration anywhere. Second, falsely flagged vessels, which claim a flag that the country explicitly denies giving them. And third, AIS Stark. These ships are legally flagged, but they deliberately switch off their tracking transponders to just vanish from the grid. So the first 2 categories completely strip away nationality, while the third is purely a concealment tactic that makes investigations an absolute nightmare. To show you the sheer audacity of this problem, check out these numbers. Recent investigations revealed a massive 170% increase over just 2 years in vessels fraudulently using Malawi's flag. We are talking about nearly 300 ships claiming to be from Malawi without any authorization whatsoever. It's wild. We actually saw a really similar pattern recently when Estonia detained the tanker Koala. It was flying a Djibouti flag, but Djibouti completely denied the vessel was registered to them. But here is exactly how the law strikes back. Under UNCLOS Article 92, vessels playing games by juggling multiple flags of convenience are actively penalized. By trying to game the system, they accidentally strip away their own high seas protections, legally assimilating into a ship without a nationality. They literally become stateless by their own actions. All right, moving on to Section 3, Article 110, the Master Key. Now, a dark fleet vessel's statelessness isn't just an investigative headache. As it turns out, it's actually the very key that unlocks international intervention. You see, under normal circumstances, stopping a foreign ship on the high seas is a huge violation of sovereignty. It's strictly forbidden. But Article 110 of UNCLOS provides this really powerful exception called the right of visit. If a warship has reasonable grounds to suspect a vessel is without nationality, they are legally permitted to board it. And this specific legal mechanism triggered a massive geopolitical shift in December 2025. The European Union suddenly moved from only targeting clear embargo violations to aggressively using Article 110 to intercept any stateless tanker. They immediately targeted at least 16 vessels under these new criteria. It proved that a vessel's statelessness is the exact legal loophole foreign warships need to actually stop them. Let's dive into Section 4, a patchwork of legal workarounds. So, because stateless vessels lack a legitimate flag state to run mandatory casualty investigations, a huge jurisdictional vacuum opens up right after a collision. And to fill this void, coastal states are having to get really creative. They're improvising, using 5 distinct legal hooks instead of one clean international rule. Let's anchor these directly to some real-world incidents to see exactly how nations are bypassing classical frameworks entirely.
Take coastal state jurisdiction, for example. Over the winter of 2024 and 2025, Finland suspected the tanker Eagle S of cable sabotage. But because high seas rules protected the ship, the Finnish border guard basically just shadowed the vessel and requested it enter Finnish territorial waters. The exact moment the Eagle S crossed that invisible maritime boundary, boom, full coastal state jurisdiction applied, which allowed armed special forces to legally board it. An even more creative workaround happened with Germany. When the Panamanian-flagged Aventin lost power and was drifting dangerously off the German coast in early 2025, Germany entirely bypassed the UNNCLS collision framework. Because the conventional maritime route was completely impractical due to the ship's murky ownership, German authorities just used domestic customs and sanctions enforcement powers to seize the whole thing, the ship and its €40 million cargo.
I really want to emphasize that this explainer is covering a live, rapidly evolving reality. Across 2025 and 2026, nations just kept improvising. Estonia detained the Kijwala in port, France seized the Grinch in the Mediterranean, and Sweden boarded the Jinhui using Article 110. Every single one of these incidents relied on a totally different legal hook. Which brings us to Section 5, the uninsured hollow victory. But here is the final, incredibly sobering complication on the ground. The entire mainstream maritime system relies on massive insurance payouts to incentivize safety and cover catastrophic damages, like massive oil spills. The Dark Fleet, however, frequently operates with zero Western insurance or sometimes absolutely no insurance at all. So even if a country executes a masterful legal maneuver and successfully arrests the ship after a collision, there is often no functioning insurer to actually pay out the damages. It essentially renders these brilliant legal victories functionally hollow, leaving the coastal states stuck footing the bill for the cleanup. So, as we wrap up this explainer, here is the big takeaway. There is no single, unified Dark Fleet protocol yet. The classical framework of UNCLOS was written for a world of genuinely flagged ships, and that world is currently being bypassed. States are basically being forced to write the rules incident by incident, drafting this fast-evolving playbook to police vessels that intentionally slip between the cracks of nationality. It leaves us with a critical, ongoing challenge. If international maritime law relies entirely on the honor system of honest states, who rules the shadows? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep an eye on how these legal battles continue to unfold.